Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangout. Today, we get to hang out with homeopath Jan Blair in the UK. Welcome to the show, Jan.
Thank you, Eugenie. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'm a big fan of your podcast and what we're doing for us homeopaths, uniting us across the world.
Oh, thank you. That's nice to hear. Now, you said I can't call you Jeanette. We're sticking with Jan, but you may find Jan on socials as Jeanette Blair as well. But actually, JB Homeopathy, I think, is what you're on Instagram. Hey. Now,
Yeah.
I asked you on here for a very specific reason because I this year found out that my husband and daughter has Erlen syndrome, and it was actually picked up by a homeopath. So my husband was seeing John Gamble, and with his unique set of symptoms, he was like, I wonder if you've got Erlen. He got tested, and after his was positive, we're like, oh, maybe that's why our daughter's having trouble reading as well. I had her tested, she was also positive. I have so many questions about all of that for you, but I'm going to hold back for just a minute because I want you to start us off with your journey into homeopathy and also into Erlen. And then we'll go into what Erlen is and my billions of questions for you.
Okay. So my journey into homeopathy was a really simple one because I grew up with homeopathy. So my mum is a homeopath. So I am a second generation homeopath. And whenever my brother and I were sick, that's the medicine that we got. So when I was deciding what I wanted to do when I was 18, my mum said to me, you'd be really good at doing what I do. I said, oh no, I don't want to do that. So off I went to university and did a languages degree actually. And then I went into the computer industry where I found myself looking after my customers. And my role was in an account management role. And I had a team of people that I worked with. And actually, what I found was that a lot of my clients would tell me their problems as we were talking through what they needed computer wise. And I started to say things like, oh, if you've got a bad back and you've strained yourself, maybe you should try some arnica, because I was just relaying what my mum had always taught me. And I found that I was getting way more interested in them coming back to me with tales about how the remedies had helped them, that I was starting to think, this is actually really interesting me. And actually, because the relationships were getting really quite on a different level to a lot of my colleagues, I was getting really good business from them because they were seeing me as a trusted confidant. So actually then when I was 28, I thought, oh, I've got to go and pursue this. So I actually went to university because we could do a degree in it then. And I went to UCLan. And funnily enough, Dr. Jean Duckworth was one of my tutors at UCLan. And now she's with Mel, doing the new course that Mel's put together, which is incredible. So yeah, and I've been a homeopath now for nearly 20 years. I can't believe it. I run a really amazing practice, and I'm in the room now from which I practice. And my foray into Erlen came as a result of my son. So my son, he was born in 2005, and we had a very difficult birth. And when he was about 5 or 6, he really struggled to read. And I couldn't understand because I'm such a prolific reader. He just had no interest he would sit with me and he'd happily look at the books as I was going through them. But he just had no interest in reading for himself. And he started at school. He was very slow to write, couldn't write initially. He was writing like this, and mirror writing with both hands, which was really unusual. And schools, I was very relaxed because I was like, school was saying to me, oh, he's a bit slow and he isn't hitting his milestones like the other children. And I was quite naive, really. I was saying, oh, no, he'll be fine. And every child was different. And I was very relaxed. They don't start school in Sweden until they're 7. Stop putting all this pressure on him. But when he was about 7, it became apparent that there were some significant issues. And we were in the kitchen trying to read one day because school were telling me he just isn't capturing the simple words. We used to have this word tin that came home, and he'd really struggled to read the words that I was holding up for him. So one day we were in the kitchen and the light was coming in through the kitchen window, and we had this book open on the kitchen table. And for some reason, it just was the perfect moment for me to see that there was a challenge, because he started going like this on the page, and he was really quite aggressive with the page. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm trying to get the splodge off the page. And I said, there isn't a splodge on the page. And he said, yes, there is. And I said, show me where it is. And he said, it's there, and there's one there, and there's one there, and there's one there. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Of course, I took him to the doctor because I thought there was something wrong with his brain. The doctor was like, there's nothing wrong with this child. I took him to the optician. The optician said he's got 20/20 vision, and still these problems persisted. And so what did I do? Turned to Google, started Googling ferociously all of these things. Brain tumor comes up, all this other stuff. And somewhere amidst all my scrolling came this thing, which was Erlen. And I contacted this woman in the States, and I cried on the phone to her when she explained to me that the problem was likely to be Erlen. And had I heard of it, I had no idea what it was. And that then started me on this whole journey of discovering what Erlen was, how it could help. And then I ended up training myself in Erlen screening because, of course, I was helping all these kids in my clinic and seeing issues coming in. And I was thinking, you've got Erlen, but there was nobody locally to send them to because it was, there was hardly anybody in the UK who knew about it and could diagnose it. So I was very lucky that I found a lady who's become a very dear friend of mine, actually. She's a teacher, and she knew somebody who'd retired from her secondary school who did Erlen testing. And I got her just before she retired. And I took my son Gregory to her, and she told me to stay out, to get out of the other room, because what she picked up on was the fact that he kept looking to me for the answers, because he was so reliant on watching cues from other people to allow him to read on the page. So, he's incredible, because now if you give him a multiple choice answer, A, B, C, or D, and the answer to the question, he will tell you what the answer is just by reading your body language, because he became that adept. And lots of children are like this. They become very adept at reading cues from teachers or other people to enable them to fit into the world. And that's unknowing to me, that's what he'd done. So she ushered me out the room, and I came back in, and to see him read, I'm going to get upset now, because it was one of those moments, he was about 7 or 8, and he'd been totally transformed by this reading, that he was able to very easily read these words on a page that he hadn't been able to do before. And it was one of those moments as a mum where you just go, wow. So sorry for the long.
I had exactly that. So I know what you mean, because my daughter was exactly the same story. I'm a prolific reader, and I couldn't understand. My oldest son's a prolific reader. I couldn't understand that she is not, like, really basic words. I'm like, how does she not know that? But, and just interestingly, she also would say poplier and ambience. And we always thought that she was just, it's really cute the way that she talks. But then you put the Erlen glasses on, and then she pronounces words correctly.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Isn't it?
But
Incredible.
now and I'm kind of like putting the cart before the horse here, because I'm trying to hold back all the questions that I have for you, but I can't. I'm sorry. But it seems that COVID has really stuffed up people's eyes, because so I'll tell you the story of my husband, that, same sort of thing, like, he's just turned 50. So they didn't know he was only diagnosed this year. And so he always at school was given such a hard time, and he's never enjoyed reading. And I just couldn't understand, how can somebody not enjoy reading? But he's an incredible problem solver. You give him any problem, whether it's IT or electric or mental, emotional, like any problem, he can fix it. He is so good at fixing problems. And he managed to work at top universities in Australia and New Zealand, and top government departments, without any formal IT education, in their top IT departments, without any formal training, and just taught him, like, just manages to solve problems like nobody else's business. So when you say about your son, like reading body language and stuff, they do become really intuitive, because they have to adapt. But the really gut-wrenching thing for us was when he went. I didn't actually go with him, he went by himself, but he said she gave him a piece of material to read. He couldn't read it. She found the right lenses, put it on, and he could read everything easily for the first time in his life. With this 6-week wait or so between him being tested and getting the glasses, he had COVID. And then he went back, and those glasses were not working. And it was another like $1,000 to redo the testing, and those glasses didn't work. He got new glasses, but they were never the same as those first ones that he got. And I'm finding that with my daughter, her reading exploded with the Erlen glasses, but
Yeah.
she's had COVID since, and those glasses are not working. She's just not wearing them anymore. And so I'm in this place now. Can homeopathy help with this? Do we just keep forking out $1,000 every time they get sick and get new glasses? Like, I was trying to hold all these questions in, Jan. I really was. But I had so many questions. Ah,
Yeah, it's frustrating. And the thing is that any drug can change. So
oh,
I've had patients who've been through chemo and it's caused a shift and they needed new lenses. Hormonal changes can cause you to need new lenses. My son will tell me when the lenses stop working for him. I mean, he's got really severe Erlen. So he understands it now in a completely different way to the way I understand it, because I can't possibly understand it because I haven't got it. But he will say to me, Mum, these lenses aren't working anymore. And I've tried to work out, okay, let's try a remedy. And the remedy hasn't, his prescriptions have changed over the years. So he gets a new prescription probably about every 12 to 18 months. And always before important exams, I always just go and get a filter check for him anyway, just to make sure that they're still working well for him. But sometimes, obviously he's on no medication, he's had no vaccinations or anything like that. So, we've been very lucky in that respect. When he's had COVID, it hasn't forced a filter check for him, but he's the one who says to me, they're not working anymore. But I have seen it with other patients where if they've, like I say, if they've had a heavy drug or hormonal change in particular, they're the ones that have needed a change.
I've got another question, but I am going to hold it back. I'm going to try really hard because I've just realized we haven't told our listeners what Erlen is. Do you maybe want to tell them what Erlen is?
Shall I share some slides with you so that you can see what
Yes,
it is?
please.
Because I think it's really good to be able to, because knowing what I know now about Erlen, it's a visual issue. It causes visual problems. So I think it'd be really good if I can show you visually what that means and what it looks like. So let me.
Absolutely. So for our listeners listening just on the audio only, you might have to hop onto Rumble. I think everyone listening to the podcast knows by now that YouTube deleted my channel with all 300 videos a little while ago. And so we are slowly trying to get them back, and we're just putting on the safe ones, the one where there's no mention of vaccinations and COVID and everything else. But you can always watch it on Rumble. So you can just type in Homeopathy Hangout podcast on Rumble and it'll come up.
Okay, can you see that, Eugenie? Is that okay?
Yeah. Is that your son driving?
My son driving, and there
Oh.
he is. They were so the picture on the left, probably his second prescription glasses, and that was taken on my 40th birthday. So you can see he hasn't altered that much in terms of his prescription, because a lot of people are terrified of Erlen glasses because they say, oh, they're those awful coloured glasses and I don't want to wear them. They don't necessarily look amazingly coloured. And this is Helen Erlen, who gave her name to the condition. Helen is just the most incredible woman. And she was to give you a bit of background about Helen, if that would be useful, she was a school psychologist and she used to go in helping children like my son and doing those tests. I mean, I don't know if you've had a test, Eugenie, for your daughter, but, I got an educational psychologist to see when he was 7, 8, having these difficulties. And he was diagnosed with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and dysgraphia at that meeting. And also the psychologist said to me, interestingly, has he had a difficult birth? And I said, yes, we did have a very difficult birth. And he was a forceps delivery. And the psychologist went, which is interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the children that I see now tend to be forceps babies. So that's a sort of a side point. But Helen was going into school as a school psychologist, as I said, doing these tests and recognizing that even though she was able to say what these children, if they had a condition like dyslexia or dysgraphia, there was still an issue with children who couldn't read. So she was very puzzled because the interventions that the teachers were putting into place in the classroom meant that the teachers were still saying, these kids still can't read, and the kids were coming away with terrible low self-esteem, terrible anxiety, because they were thinking that there was something wrong with them. And of course, these children, if you can't see what's on the page, they look at the page next to their classmate and the page looks the same. So they think that there's something wrong with them. So Helen, luckily, was able to get this federal research grant to study a group of specific adults, they were 18 through university. They got to university, they'd struggled all the way through, but they still had difficulties reading. And she was able to study the habits of these young adults and try and determine what was going on and see what she could do to help them. And that's how Erlen came about. So what she did was she decided to turn things around by asking the young adults what kinds of things that they saw when they were reading. So she said that the questions needed to be asked in a completely different way. So she came about it actually very much like a homeopathic interview, actually. It's quite interesting. There's parallels between the two. And she discovered that by asking the right questions, people then would say to her, I have difficulty with what I see on the page. The words are moving, the words are blurry, the words are making me feel dizzy. So she recognized that there were specific distortions that people see on the page that people who have no problem reading don't see at all. And we make assumptions that what we see on the page is normal, right? We don't necessarily ask the right questions. So she came up with a whole host. What she did is she said to people, okay, show me, draw for me what on the page. And that's what we know today as the Erlen distortions. So I'll show you just a few of them.
My
So
daughter
this is
has
all,
got she told me the other day, literally just a couple of weeks ago, that she prefers all capitals because then the rivers are not bothering her as much as she sees the rivers. And my husband said until he had the Erlen glasses, he just thought that all printing was bad because some letters were bold and some were light. And he just thought that's how printing is like, like he just thought that's how all printing is like. How would you know?
yeah,
How would you? I couldn't know.
it's awful, isn't it? And we don't talk about it because
No.
we make terrible assumptions, don't we? But the truth is we don't all see things the same way. And so I've just captured some of the distortions on a video because sometimes when you see it moving, it really brings it home that this is what some people see when they try to read. So we call this one, so for those who are listening, there's a swirl that occurs on the page. Words can lift off the page. Words can look like they're appearing on a cinema screen. We call that one Star Wars because at the beginning of Star Wars movies, that's what always happens. This might be what your husband experiences, this washout, where you get the black and it quickly washes out and goes to white, or the words start to disappear on the page. Really debilitating. Of course, it's absolutely exhausting to try and read. The physical symptoms are huge with Erlen. That's words can come in waves. And you can't believe that this is what some people actually see when they try to.
Makes you feel nauseous just looking at it.
It does, it absolutely does. And people will come in and they say that they feel dizzy, they feel sick when they're trying to read. And of course, a lot of these kids, and this is what Helen Erlen discovered when she was working in education, these kids were being dismissed because they were saying to their teachers, I've got a headache, I feel sick. And the teacher just thought they were being difficult and would send them out of the room. And so, for a lot of these children, they couldn't access their education. They're left feeling like there's something wrong with them, that they're stupid. I mean, so many people who I see for screenings, they'll come in and they'll say to me, I am so thick, I can't read. And that still happens to this day, that children are made to feel stupid, thick. Adults too. I screen a lot of adults. So
it feels like you should create like an Erlen rubric with the remedies that you use. Hopefully you give these people remedies
yes,
alongside. Yeah. Like you should create your own
Okay.
Erlen rubric that we can use with remedies that's most used.
Definitely. That's a really great idea. Yeah. Do you know what? I should do that. And so what Helen determined was that there was something that was occurring between the eye and the brain. So something wasn't being processed properly. And because she was in a university, she started doing some delving into this. There was a dominant eye theory that was in vogue at the time, and they used red and green glasses with children who, they were trying to do it for sports people, this dominant eye. If you're a golfer, you should definitely use your dominant eye when you're putting. So they were using this red and green method, and Helen got some of these red and green glasses, and you cover one eye and then you see whether you can read better. And they were really focused on the eye, physical issues with the eyes and reading. And these kids were being sent for glasses. They were coming back with the prescriptions, but it still wasn't making any difference. What Helen did is she used a red overlay just by sheer chance, actually. And some of the children said, oh my goodness, I can read now by putting the red overlay on the page. And because she was at the university, she had the brilliant idea to go to the theatre department and grab hold of the gel colours that were used to change the colours for the lights in the theatre. It was completely by chance that she discovered this. So she used some of these gel filters, applied them to the print, and suddenly these young adults started reporting that they could read the page. It was just incredible, this discovery. And she just, it was a eureka moment. And she said, oh my goodness, we're onto something. So she, obviously, to cut a very long story short, she then developed some overlays, and there are 10 Erlen overlays that you can get. And one lady that she did this testing on said, and I love this quote, it's like you put seatbelts on the words. And I love that, because for these people, the big issue is the printed word lacks stability. And what the overlays did is, and what the overlays continue to do, is that they give stability to the print on the page, allowing somebody to relax and to be able to read. And I love this poem. I won't read it out, but this poem was written and sent to Helen by a little girl whose life was transformed when she got an overlay and she was able to read. Basically, and this is a very long-winded answer to your question, Eugenie, that Erlen syndrome is a visual processing problem in the brain. So it's got nothing to do with the eyes, but it's got everything to do with the brain. And we see that there is an issue with the visual cortex, and the brain has to cope with so much visual information in terms of inputting, and it has a tremendous difficulty in processing certain wavelengths of light. So for some people, there are certain wavelengths that the brain can't process. So for somebody who doesn't have Erlen, like me, I don't have that problem. But for somebody who does have Erlen, they have an issue with processing certain wavelengths of light. And then light becomes a stressor on the brain. So you can get, you see this in the supermarket. You see this a lot these days now, where you've got a person with autism, say, and the lights are so intense in a supermarket that the person with autism has got to put a hood over their head, because the sensory overload is such that they just can't cope with the light that's coming at them from all angles. So this overactivity and the stress that this causes leads to a tremendous amount of physical, cognitive, emotional, and neurological symptoms. So you can get a wide range of symptoms that somebody is suffering from with Erlen. And here's just some of them. Obviously, you've got the reading problems that we've spoken about, a tremendous light sensitivity. In shops, in particular, you notice it with people who have it. We've spoken about dizziness and nausea. I have one patient who was physically sick every time she tried to read. It's just so debilitating. And the teachers thought she had anxiety. And obviously, anxiety is a symptom as well, because it does cause anxiety, Erlen, because it makes you feel, some people get breathless and panicky when they're reading, especially if they're asked to read out loud in the class. Obviously, attention and concentration problems. And Erlen can often go misdiagnosed, and children can be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder when actually it's Erlen. Headaches are a big problem. Some people will get a headache as soon as they start reading. My son is one of those people. So of course you're going to avoid reading, aren't you, if it's going to make you feel so dreadful.
My hubby gets the migraines from the light, and because apparently with Erlen, often the pupil can be larger than normal, and so it lets in more light. So any sort of flashes will just trigger a migraine. But this is where homeopathy is great, because John Gamble gave him iris for that, because he would then get an aura when he's had that flash, and the iris has helped a lot with the migraines. So
yeah, perfect. I find for some reason xerophyllum is a really useful remedy that I use a lot with people, and that seemed to work really well. Fidgeting, strain fatigue. My son has a really great expression. He says, my social battery is empty. If he doesn't have his Erlen glasses on and he's interacting with people, he just can't focus on the interaction as well as when he has his Erlen glasses. So he refers to that as a social battery, and that it drains your battery. A really big issue for some people is depth perceptions. I once helped a boy who was being taken to the golf driving range with his dad, and they were having arguments because dad was a big golfer and he thought golf would be really good for his son to play with him. And this boy was having tremendous problems in school, and he'd been to see a colorimeter person. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later on when we talk about the filters themselves. But his dad would put a golf ball down and he'd miss the golf ball. And I just asked him the simple question, where do you see the ball going? And his mum was with him. And he said, well, I know my dad puts the ball, say, here. He said, but I see the ball there, there. He would see a line of about 7 or 8 balls. And he said to me, I just don't know which ball I'm supposed to hit. And his mum is crying her eyes out, going, why didn't you tell me? And he said, well, you never asked, because he didn't realize that wasn't normal. So this depth perception problem, kids playing football, they don't know where the ball is. So they go to hit the ball. It's not where they think it is, or where their visual cortex is alerting them to where it is. So they miss it. They get laughed at. They're not going to go back to football, are they? These kids can be really present with terrible anxiety and low self-esteem issues. They might come to me for low self-esteem and nervous twitches and all kinds of things because socially they've been excluded, or they feel like they're a misfit. And actually, the issue is Erlen. It's so sad. Obviously, gross and fine motor skills highly affected by Erlen, because if you can't see where you're writing, you don't develop those skills, that you can't catch a ball because you can't see where the ball's landing. Yeah, and obviously print distortions as well. In terms of who's affected, Erlen Institute recognised that about 14% of the general population will have Erlen. And if you think about this in terms of how many people in prison might have Erlen, there's a lot of work that could be done to help people, to allow them to access their education. What a lot of people don't realise is that you can acquire Erlen. So Erlen is often hereditary, as you've recognised in your own family, but also you can acquire it as a result of a head injury. There's a lot of work that's done with veterans with PTSD, particularly in the military, who've had significant head injuries as a result of collisions that they've had, sports people, concussions, that kind of thing. That can all lead to an Erlen diagnosis later in life. But again, people don't know enough about it, so they don't know what they need to do to help themselves. So there are a number of self-tests that you can take, and these are all available on the Erlen website, to determine whether or not you might be affected by Erlen. And this could be something that could be just rolled out, couldn't it, to every school? It's really simple. If somebody's struggling with reading, just ask these really simple questions, and it's literally yes or no, and you can see whether it would be worth you going for an Erlen test. So what I love about these self-tests is they're very specific about reading issues, but also they're about how you feel when you read, because these subjective symptoms are really, really important when analysing whether or not you've got visual stress.
There's a couple of times I recognized it in clinic and I just sent people straight to the Erlen Center, but it would have been nice if there was some cheaper sort of thing that I could have sent them to first, just to assess whether that is something that they should look into further. Because
oh yeah, I can send you these.
it'd be
And
amazing.
you just have them in your clinic.
Okay.
And then you can just let people take them away and see whether, because if they're ticking, like the one on the left, sorry for the people who are listening on audio, but the one on the left, do you skip words or lines when reading? Yes. Do you reread lines? Yes. Do you lose your place? Yes. Just even answering 3 yeses might be worth you going for an Erlen test. So yeah, I'll send you those and you can have them.
Thanks.
If you answer yes to a lot of those questions and you've got issues reading, you skip words, you lose your place, you can't read a graph effectively, you can't skip to a little bit in the text, you can't skim read. You know, if you're a prolific reader, Eugenie, like me, I skim read a lot. People with that can't skim read because it makes them feel ill and they lose their place. So if you're answering yes to a lot of these symptoms, it's well worth you probably going for an Erlen test. And the Erlen test is quite, as your husband probably explained to you and you saw with your daughter, it's quite in depth, and an Erlen screener will be able to determine exactly what your issues are. And then that all gets put into a report that you can send to school so that school understand and all the teachers understand the particular issues that person is experiencing.
I actually, about a year ago, when my daughter said to me, I know that one is, I think that one is an S, but I know that it's not actually, that's actually a T. And I was like, because then if it's a B and a D, you can understand that it was like a S and a T. And she's like, I know that's what I think it is, but it's not actually. And it made me so sad because she's got to read the word. Then she's got to figure out whether the letters in that word is what she thinks it is or the actual letters. And then she has to say the word. And my husband was also saying like he has to read a word one at a time. Then he has to read it again so he can see what it is in context. And for me as well, who skim reads and reads ahead, I can't imagine, like my heart breaks. But
Yeah.
that's, it's, but then I think these days as well, with all the more visual type learning that we have and more audio learning, and like actually being able to read with your eyes is not that important anymore. There's other ways that you can get information in, which is, that's why so glad that you're raising awareness with this. And I can't wait to hear the pennies drop for a few people. And you know what? I'm really
Oh,
sad. I didn't get to go to my daughter's Erlen testing as well because my clinic's been so busy and the testing is an hour and a half away. So hubby took her as well. So I've never seen the Erlen testing done. They just
okay.
came back and tell me about all the things that they did.
Okay. I could show you some of the Erlen tests that we do if that would be useful. That's just one of the tests that we use. The picture that you can see in front of you, and it determines how you look at a picture. This is a picture of a pumpkin, and often you'll get people saying, "Oh, the white's going." The eyes are coming up at me, or people come up with the most unbelievable symptoms. I remember I had the most unbelievable guy came in and he had an ability to read a map in 3D. So you know how we see a map on the page? I don't know how you see a map. You'll have to tell me. I see a map on the page as just a flat page. He would see mountain ranges and he was able to see visually what the map is interpreting for him, it was a 3D image. Just unbelievable.
Incredible.
So, I often describe it as you've got super skills that I haven't got because you can see stuff I can't see, and actually it's how we use that, how we turn that around and give the kid, if you can get the kids early, that gives them immense confidence to then go out into the world and do something with that, as opposed to, I see so many people who it's not picked up. They leave school with terrible issues and the terrible, I go back to this low self-esteem, but it's huge because they've just been left and they've left thinking that something's wrong with them.
And huge kudos to Sir Richard Branson, who's always advocating for businesses to employ people with different skills because he obviously has dyslexia himself. And I just think that it's great that we have all these people whose brains work in different ways, because the problems that we have in the world, we can't solve it with the same brains that created it. So we need like different brains, I think.
You are too right. So this might interest you because this is an actual, so you go for a screening with somebody who can screen for Erlen, then you go for a filter diagnostic test. And this is the lovely Deborah, who's local to me, who does that. I don't do the filter testing, I just do the screening. And Deborah goes through every single filter so that she can determine what wavelengths your brain can't interpret. And then the filters, you can see the filters being applied there. And I've got some video actually of my son having it done, which might be useful for people to see. And I think this is my daughter actually. Oh, we have no audio, do we?
Oh, I can hear it.
Oh, can you? Oh, good.
We haven't changed your visual perception of colour. So when you look at these, are they easy to see or a bit tricky?
Basically what happens is all the, except from the really obvious ones like these and these and this, the other colours are hide and it's really hard for me to see the numbers or if they're letters.
Okay, so when you pop those up,
it's so much easier and it's really obvious which numbers and which letters they are.
So it just makes it everything, you can see it more easily and quicker.
Yeah.
Good.
Was that in the COVID era with that big Perspex glass in between?
It was. It was. And you have to find a way to get over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see that some of I can read the numbers that are hidden in those squares.
Yeah.
But people with Erlen can't necessarily see those. So when you apply the filters, suddenly everything becomes clear and they can read them. So that's a really good test that Deborah does to determine what filter you need.
Okay.
And this is what blows my mind, because there's over 100,000 combinations, color combinations. And this is where us homies will really love this, because everything's individualized to that person. So no two, especially when you change prescription as well, no two prescriptions are the same. So often people will say, oh, try, this is an issue with Erlen, like it is with homeopathy, funnily enough. Oh, you've got Erlen, try this overlay, try these glasses. They're not going to work for that person because it has to be individualized.
Interesting. You actually just made me think of something as how we've got these sound remedies that are made from 432 hertz. I wonder if you could make wavelength remedies and then give that to people depending on the
Yeah.
wavelength.
I was thinking as well of Ambicas.
Yes, exactly.
I need to look more into those and seeing if they can help.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. So here's another video. This is my son trying filters. I thought it might be useful for you to see.
Spaces are bigger with those, right?
Oh. You would imagine that if you had Erlen due
take
to...
them off again then.
Oh.
So does the headache immediately come back?
The eyes come back first, and then
What do you mean the eyes?
Eyes fullness
So is it again underneath or is it in your eye socket?
above and there.
Right. Anything behind or above up here?
No, just there, there, and there.
Right. And when you pop those up, what goes first? Your eyes
Yeah, eyes and then head.
and then head.
He like starts to smile,
Yeah.
doesn't he?
Before you went, your shoulders dropped like, that's a relief.
The questioning is quite homeopathic, hey? Like the way that she's asking the questions.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It's got so many correlations.
Mm.
And it's interesting the way Helen Erlen discovered it as well, because despite all the questions she would ask us, the school psychologist, she realised that she wasn't asking the right questions.
Mm.
And we're only as good as the information we get, aren't we, in terms of the efficacy of our questioning of people.
Mm. How interesting. Oh, you would imagine that with the Erlen that comes on after a head injury, that you would be able to use like arnica or nat sulf or Helleborus or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get that back. Because
And of course-
there's actually a homeopath who said that he used to have Erlen, and with homeopathic remedies and like somatic therapies, he's actually completely healed it.
Wow. I noticed with my son, he's definitely got better as the years have gone on, and he's had many more remedies, lots of therapy, cranial work, but he still needs them, still needs the glasses, especially at night when he's driving, because all the lights coming at him, especially on a motorway, really affected his Erlen.
Oh my goodness. And now I'm just sorry, my brain's just going in overdrive
Oh.
today. Like belladonna low potency, like 3x or something like that. You know how they used to, the reason that belladonna got its name is that they would
Yes,
put the berry
exactly.
in the eye and it would actually dilate the pupil. And I wonder if
Yeah.
you use belladonna and like 3x potency, if that would like, because it has like
Yeah.
vasoconstriction properties in like low.
Yeah, I've used belladonna, especially when
have?
he's got kind of, I've used it with congestive headache. I've used aesculus to good effect as well. I've used that.
Wow.
Oh yeah, he's had thousands of remedies over the past 20 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And he had all of the remedies when he was born for the forceps damage. He also had blood taken from his head while he was still in the birth canal twice. So he had a needle put into the top of his scalp to withdraw blood to test his oxygen levels, which was very traumatic. So he was significantly hurt when he came out and got whisked away to an incubator. So he had, all of the trauma remedies as soon as he was born.
You're giving me so many great ideas, because my daughter had a beautiful home birth, drug-free home birth. Is definitely zero birth trauma. And my son, my husband, I know his mum had a physiological birth with him as well. So interesting. You're giving me lots of ideas here.
Yeah, really interesting. And what's funny for me, homeopathically, is that I was told to have a hysterectomy after my son's birth. I had to have corrective surgery 12 months later. But I refused and my mum and I set about coming up with a plan to get me better. And 4 years later, on my son's 4th birthday, I gave birth to my daughter in a pool at home. And that is like yours like, isn't it? In practice, her birth put right an awful lot of things that went wrong. So to get back to our Erlen, the neuroscience is catching up with it all as well, which is fantastic for us as screeners, because we can prove now what Erlen lenses do to a brain when we apply them to a real person. So you can see that's a SPECT scan on the left-hand side. You can see that somebody without filters who has Erlen, it causes what we term as hotspots in the brain. So lots of areas are lighting up in the brain to try and process what a person is seeing. And then when you apply the filters, the same brain calms down, and you can see the difference on the right-hand side with the filters applied. And so what this means is that somebody can quieten down, the noise lessens. sensory processing becomes much easier. A lot of people with autism will complain about sensory issues, like they can't wear certain clothes or they can't touch certain things. And then when they put their Erlen glasses on, those things don't have the same feeling to them, so they can wear the clothes that were bothering them before because the brain has just calmed down. It's quite incredible,
Far out,
really.
it really is.
Yeah. So the brain just becomes, I hate the word normal because what is normal, but you know, the brain, it's referred to as a normalization of brain activity when wearing the filters.
I think neurotypical is the PC word.
Yeah, neurotypical. So I love this photograph because this is what my son wrote, because we used to do lots of sensory work to try and get his brain working in terms of understanding how to write, because he just couldn't write. He couldn't read, he couldn't write. So we used to do a lot of writing in the sand and stuff like that to get him going. And when he had his filters on, he was able to see what he was actually writing. And he wrote me this message in the sand. And it was sheer hard work for a long time, but the glasses unlocked everything for him. And this is him saying this quote. What he says they do for him is they stop my headaches, put the world back into focus for me, allowing me to block out all other distractions and focus on my work or a task I need to do. They stop me feeling uncomfortable in my own skin and allow me to relax. And that, the photograph of us at the bottom, is the day he got his A-level results, which, you know, primary school always said to me, he'll never pass, he'll never do this, he can't read, he can't write, da, 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 da. And he got his A-levels and he's now at university and loving life. And it just shows you what's possible, really, from such a, teachers can write kids off. And here's just some, sorry, Jeannie.
No, I sometimes wonder, do you reckon it's actually good for them to wear the glasses as much as possible? Because there was a part of me that was wondering, maybe if you wear it too much, then the brain will get too used to it and then you'll become reliant on it even more. But do you think it's actually good to wear it as much as possible?
I think it's good to wear them all the time because the distortions in the environment improve with you wearing them as well. And actually, I've seen huge improvement in people who do wear them all the time as opposed to people who don't wear them. So they need them less. It's a weird relationship because the more they wear them, the less they need them. Does that make sense? So you see that over time. I think the brain changes. I can't determine that. I can't prove that. But I think the brain is able to calm down to such an extent that then other changes can take place. Or maybe it's new synapses, maybe it's new neural programming. I don't know.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about individual success stories, but here's just a few. And, you know, you can see the difference, the range in glasses. The boy in the right-hand side, far right-hand side, it's changed his life. He has tremendous sensory issues, but he doesn't wear them all the time now because he's much calmer. He's able to soothe himself and do other therapy to enable him to, you know, like you were saying earlier about the somatic work, he's able to do much more therapy work now to enable him to improve other aspects of his diagnosis. So in terms of research, there's just so much research on it. I'm not going to bore you with all of that. The resources are available from the erlensyndrome.org website. I can send you these self-tests. It'd be really useful to have. I've just put a few remedies, of course, that have really helped other people. We could do a whole podcast on remedies that could help with dyslexia and learning difficulties for sure. Some of them that obviously NAP is huge for any issue, to any injury to the head. You know, I haven't mentioned hypericum. I haven't mentioned vellus perennis. You know, you could have a whole conversation about that, couldn't you? But zinc has been incredibly useful as well. Yeah, I could go on and on. Carcinosin, interesting. I mean, we had a little chat about carcinosin earlier, didn't we? Medarine, really useful. Agaricus, incredible. Obviously, britacarb, that's known in the repertory, isn't it? For, I think it was termed 100 years ago, slow retarded children. Horrendous language. But, you know,
delayed development, arrested development, I think is the actual rubric. Arrested development. Yeah, amazing. Do you see much synesthesia in your clinic? Because my husband told me like one day about how he days of the week and months have got colors, and it's not just like that if I say to him, what color is February? He doesn't just say pink. He'll say, it's like a fluffy pink with a little bit of dusting of this, and very specific. And it was literally only this year my daughter said something. She said, Mommy, what do you like? What color is Monday for you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then
Oh,
and
wow,
she
yeah.
told me, and then I said, do you know that your dad has that? So I didn't even realize that. And then they were like, oh, you have it too. And then my son, even though it doesn't have Erlen, he's got a little bit of synesthesia as well. So it's really fun. And their colors are all different. So they like, what color is your Monday? Oh, my Monday is this. Oh, my Monday is this. So it's all different. But I think that synesthesia is one of the things with Erlen as well, or not typically. It's just my
It
family.
can be. I don't see that generally. I have a patient who does it with numbers, interestingly, but I don't see that necessarily a thing.
Oh, that's
with
interesting.
Erlen.
Erlen lady here did say then that she does see that as well. So maybe it's a geographical
Oh,
thing.
interesting. Okay.
Interesting.
Interesting. Shall I
That's
come
why
out
it's
of that
great.
now?
That's why it's great having these conversations though, hey, because we're always learning from each other. And zero phylum, I have never heard of that remedy. I always pride myself that I am like my materia medica knowledge is pretty good, and I've usually at least heard of a remedy if I don't know what it does. But what is zero phylum? It sounds like a plant.
It's a plant, yeah. I can't remember what
Ah.
it is, but
Oh, it's
re-
pretty.
yeah, really useful. Have you looked it up?
Genus, yeah. Brain
Let me
process.
come out now.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, I just found that a really useful. Let me turn off the
Excellent.
screen. Found that a really useful remedy for some reason.
Amazing. Excellent. Oh, thank you so much for that. So, what are some of the, I mean, you went through some of those symptoms that people might experience. What are some of the, if somebody's listening to this podcast
Yeah.
and maybe their child has been struggling at school with ADHD or learning or things like that, like what are some things that that you can say that should make them perk up, that maybe they should go and get Erlen testing done? I know you covered some of it, just wondering for anyone listening, like what should make them think that maybe this is something worth investigating?
So if they find it really hard to sustain attention for a long time, the trouble is now we're in an attention crisis, aren't we? Because of what's happened with technology and the way our kids are learning as well at school. So attention is a big thing with Erlen. And if they are reluctant to read, if they are reluctant to read aloud, if they start to there are big physical symptoms with Erlen that are big red flags. So people will get watery eyes, or people will get scratchy and itchy, and they describe it as sand in their eyes. They'll try and shield themselves when they're reading. They'll try and shield the light, or they'll move further. They'll bring the book to them, and or they'll go like this, or some people will even go like this, because for them the text looks like it's going round a corner. So if they're doing funny physical things when they're reading, that's a big red flag.
And you just reminded me, my daughter did that as well. Like she brought the book so close to her face. Yeah. Because I'm just thinking ADHD is so common these days, and fidgeting is so common these days. So I think that some of those things that everyone can have that. But I like where you're going with, like these are some things that you should definitely go and get Erlen checked.
Yeah. So often what I'll do is I'll give somebody a big piece of A3 paper, and I'll say, just show me, draw for me what. And one boy in particular just got a big, so I give them a pencil case and I let them pick the chosen pen. One boy picked up a huge, great big black marker and angrily went like this on the page, and big black lines. And I said, where do you see that? And he said, I see that everywhere. And his mum was just brokenhearted. And she said, what do you mean you see it everywhere? He said, it's here. This is what I see, Mum, in front of me. Here. All these black lines in his environment. So sometimes people, if they're startled, sometimes people think that they have a big startle reflex, but they feel like something's coming at them. That can be a red flag. Stairs. People who trip up and down the stairs because they can't quite see where the step is. Or I had one patient who had a stripy carpet on their stairwell, and she was forever falling up and falling down. And she would be at the bottom of the stairs, bracing herself to go upstairs because the lines made her feel sick. and because there's stripes on the carpet.
Wow.
Bumping into somebody as you're walking, you can be walking along a road and somebody can't quite keep in line, they'll be forever bumping. That can be a sign of Erlen. The whiteboard at school, one of the worst things we did was change from blackboards to whiteboards. Whiteboards can cause a huge problem. So people can't sustain that level of concentration on what's coming on the whiteboard, and they look away a lot. So what the teachers will say is they're inattentive. They keep looking away. They're not focused. They're not listening. And it's not that they're inattentive and not listening. It's just that they can't look. It pains them to look at white. So it's this contrast problem between black and white. So if you go onto the Erlen website, what you can do is change the background color of the actual website, which can be really useful. And you can just play around with the colors and say, oh, does pink make it more comfortable for me? Does green make it more comfortable for me? And actually just changing the background color of your laptop or writing on a different colored paper can make all the difference. So I have some children who, when I'm screening them, I always test to see, is it more comfortable for you to write on blue paper, white paper, green paper, whatever. And actually for a lot of children, I can put this into your report. They'll achieve a much better mark, and they'll get a much better response if they can write their exams on a different colored paper. And then the school is beholden then to do that for them, because it makes such a difference.
Yeah, they said that for my daughter as well, to do it in green. And luckily she's in a Steiner school, so they actually do use blackboards with beautiful
great.
art. I know these kids are so lucky.
And another giveaway just quickly is kids who prefer reading comics. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, for instance.
That's what she told me. She said, Mama, can you buy me more comics? Which actually they just arrived today because they're all in capitals. And so this is a funny story, because I posted literally last week in a homeschool group and just saying, what books can you recommend that's all in capitals? And because my daughter has Erlen, and then they mentioned a few comics that said Calvin and Hobbes is still all capitals, and Dogman and all that sort of stuff. But then somebody said that there is a font on a Kindle that you can change the font to dyslexia friendly. And so we're going to try that with her. And I just thought that's something worth mentioning as well, because I did not know that there is a dyslexia font on Kindles.
Yeah, brilliant. And dictation, kids who prefer to dictate, and you can use a certain fonts as you're typing, make it easier for them to be able to type and read at the same time, because often they can't do two things at once. So for instance, another telltale sign is issues with comprehension. So when they have to read a passage and then answer specific questions about a particular part of the text, they can't jump to that part of the text. That's a telltale sign, because they'll find that really difficult. Losing your place when you're reading. Also, big thing is not remembering what you're reading. What happens with Erlen is, because your brain is that overstimulated trying to read, you read to read the word for reading's sake, rather than reading for meaning. Often one of the first things that I'll do with somebody when they come in and I'm trying to ascertain, is this Erlen, is this something else? I'll give them a very simple paragraph to read, and then I'll say, tell me what happened to Mary. Mary was walking down the road and Mary saw a car crash and da-da-da-da-da. And they'll go, no idea. Yeah.
That was what my husband was saying, put the glasses on, and for the first time he could actually understand or actually remember what it was that he was reading. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And you know what? The most incredible thing is this is going to make me upset again, but people who have Erlen are incredibly resilient people, because they've had to work so hard. They're tenacious. They don't give up, because they've had to overcome all of these issues that nobody knew about. They don't have the vocabulary to be able to express it. They think that it's normal. And you know what they have to overcome is just incredible. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome what your husband's achieved in spite of his difficulties.
It is amazing, and amazing what your son has achieved. And my daughter's still achieving things all the time, but I know that she's going to great heights. She reckons she's going to be a homeopathic vet and an artist on the weekends, apparently, and now also a singer and an actor.
Yeah, you often find as well that they are very creative people.
That's what I was going to say. I have an incredible artwork in my clinic of a blue wren that was painted by a 12-year-old girl with dyslexia. It is incredible. And when I have any child coming into the clinic with any sort of dysgraphia or dyslexia, whatever, I just show them, I say, see how beautiful that is? That was painted by a 12-year-old girl with dyslexia, which was going to be my next question. How does dyslexia and Erlen differ? I saw one of your slides that
Yeah,
said it was a different part of the brain that is accessed, but can you say a
different
little bit
parts
something
of
about
the
that?
brain. So you don't get them in the same, you don't necessarily have them together.
Mm.
So it can be either or it can be and. So it's dyslexia is more an issue with processing sounds, and the Erlen is visual. So there is a distinction, but they're very confusing because sometimes they can present very similarly.
Mm.
And often with dyslexia, you get that phonological issue, like you were describing about your daughter saying ambulance in a really cute way.
Ambulance, Poplier.
Yeah, yeah, because they don't hear they're not able to process the phonological, they're not able to decode the phonological meanings. And so they come out confused and jumbled. Whereas the Erlen is more the visual processing side.
She was saying that before she could read. So when she was still quite little, it was always like Poplier and ambulance. And trying to think of what the other words. And we just always thought it was really cute. But then we realized it's actually an Erlen thing, which was really interesting.
Yeah, totally. And also big thing with Erlen is an issue with reading music as well. So you'll have, I don't know, this is a thing. A lot of my Erlen patients are quite musical, but they learn to read. They can't read music, so they learn to play music by ear, or they copy. Show piano players show me how to do it, and then they copy it, and they can remember it, and they remember it in a very feeling way. They'll say, yeah, I know how that feels, so I know how it should sound, and they'll correct it when it sounds the wrong way. Whereas somebody who doesn't have Erlen will just be able to read a piece of music because music moves for them. The music will move about on the page, so they can't sustain that concentration to enable them to read the music and then play the instrument.
I have to go ask my daughter now because she does play piano. She's played piano for a few years, but
Does she use overlays on the?
No,
does
she
use overlays?
doesn't. No, I never thought that could be an issue as well. But her piano is really good, so I'm really intrigued to hear how that goes. But you just also made me think of, with Ambika's color remedies, whether you could give the homeopathic remedy, color remedy of the one that they're missing.
I know, that's why I was so excited, because I think I emailed you, didn't I, about Ambika's chat with you, and I was like, oh, this is a whole thing that I need to look at now, and I will look at it.
Please do. And there's also an Australian bushflower essence. I cannot remember which one it was, but I did bring it home for hubby. It was Bush Fuchsia. The Australian bushflower essence, Bush Fuchsia. There is in Ian White's book, records of kids who have markedly improved their dyslexia using Bush Fuchsia. I've got it here. I just need to remember to give it to them.
Oh, amazing! Because I actually use electroessence a lot for.
I do love the electroessence.
Yes, for a lot of the sensory issues that can go hand in hand with Erlen, and that seems to calm them too.
Vernix is my other favorite, hey? Like Vernix for sensory overload, because it's, they're super sensitive to everything in their environment and everything around them. Yeah, I love Vernix.
Yeah, and funnily enough, it's funny that because my daughter was covered in it and my son wasn't. So I've given him that. And I often think, is that a thing?
I use Vernix a lot in the water bottles. So I have a lot of clients who are very sensitive to their surroundings, and I'll get them to put Vernix 200C in their water bottle, shake it, and then just drink it throughout the day. And it's like their little psychic coat of armor. And I've never had an aggravation from that remedy, and clients just love it.
And I've never used it in water, so I'm going to try that now, Eugenie.
Try the electro. You could probably do the same thing, and in fact, you probably put electro and Vernix together in a water bottle, shake it, and then, especially if you're going to go to like a crowded area or even school.
Yeah, a lot of I'll tell them to put the electro in their water for school, and mums come back and say, "Oh gosh, it's so calm today. It's incredible." So I'll add Vernix to it now.
Sarah Valentini told me the other day you can put Vernix in your bath water as well. So if you've had a particularly draining day, you can put some Vernix in your bath water.
Oh, I
love coat you overall. And Ian White likes to use, Ian White from Bushflower Essence likes to use the Bushflower Essences in water in a bath as well. Bathe in the remedies. This is the funny thing with interviewing all these homeopaths on the podcast is we don't really know each other from a bar of soap. You start chatting and you never run out of things to talk about.
This is the most wonderful thing. And this is what the most incredible thing is that you're doing, bringing us all together, because I say to the students that I teach at the Northwest College of Homeopathy in Manchester, Yeah, not that much. I only go in a few times a year, but I spend time with the fourth years, and I say to them, this is one of the most exciting times to be a homeopath now, because when I trained 20 years ago, we didn't have any of these things. And so we ended up being quite isolated, working on our own. And what you're doing, bringing us all together worldwide, is just incredible. I tell them all, go and listen to Eugenie's podcast.
Aw.
You'll have access to all of these amazing people. It's just
Aw.
wonderful, because it's the community of us where we can all learn from each other, isn't it?
It is really good. Can you please also tell them to donate to the podcast? Because very few people know it costs me about $100 to produce each episode. That's what I pay my editor. Nobody knows that. So it's cost a lot of money to produce the podcast, but you can't expect people to know because this is all like behind the scenes stuff. But anyway, this goes
No,
off
I
to my
will
beautiful editor, Margie, and she does everything. She writes the show notes, she uploads it, she edits it, she does everything. So I just get to hang out and have fun. But I do have to pay Margie, and that money comes out of my pocket unless I get donations. So that was just like a little, just sliding a little bit of advertising in there. Oh, thank you
it's
so
important.
much, Jan. I think both hubby and daughter needs to go back and just get their glasses maybe redone and just persist with a little bit more, because it was only like this year that they got it, and they both, because they got COVID, got put off a little
It's
bit.
hard. And actually, and this needs to be said, the actual testing process can be hard for somebody with Erlen as well, because it
Yeah.
requires you to concentrate, and it can confuse the brain. So actually, this is where having a great relationship with the Erlen diagnostician really helps, because Deborah is just amazing, because she'll say, just come back and we'll rerun them. Or she'll notice when you do need to have some breaks sometimes during the screening process, because it is utterly exhausting. My son will come back from a screening, need to sleep, because it is utterly exhausting for the brain to go through all those filters.
Wow.
When you remember that there's 100,000 combinations, there's a lot to get right.
The testing itself takes really long. Hey, I know he said it was about at least an hour and a half, maybe even longer. It's quite long.
Yeah, I try and cut it down, because it does exhaust the person. You've got the testing itself where you're doing here's some of the things that we use. You go through all of this test to see what your span of recognition is. How much can you see on a page? And some people can only see like this much. This is where avid readers will be able to scan a whole page and see all of this, whereas somebody with Erlen might only be able to see
what would they
this
see
much
on the rest of the page, just like a blur?
Yeah, or flashing. They'll get flashing on the page, or some people will say, oh, I can see a rainbow. And I've given them iris when they say that, and that's actually really helped. But they'll say, I can see, or some people will say, I see purple running across the page, or it runs up, or it runs down. It's mind-boggling what people will say they see.
Wow. Or you could give them the Remedies Spectrum as well. That's another one of my favorites.
Spectrum,
Yeah, in fact, speaking of spectrum, it's supposed to help with the cerebrospinal fluid flowing through, how the sphenoid bone gets a little bit stuck sometimes. And then rainbow apparently helps with that cerebrospinal fluid so that the sphenoid bone can move again. And I'm just wondering now with brain development and things like that, if that could be, who knows? Anyway, it's all these ideas. I think my brain's a little bit ADHD, because whenever it's impossible for me to not have remedies flying around my head all day long.
Totally. Actually, a really useful concern has always been his placenta, because I had a remedy made from my placentas.
Beautiful.
So I've given that to him, and that really helps to calm him down.
I try to tell as many of my mum clients as possible to make remedies from the umbilical cord, your breast milk, your colostrum, your vernix, everything that you can. Jan, we could probably chat for many more hours, but yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I feel a little bit guilty having you on, because I feel like I've just hogged you for myself to try and get as much information for myself out of this. But I know it's going to help so many of our listeners as well, that I just want to get teary if I think of how many people are going to be listening to this podcast that will finally get an answer to the problems that they've had with their child at school and everything else. And I'm looking forward to hearing some beautiful success stories. And thank you for the work that you're doing as well to raise this awareness and to help these families.
Just ask, the big question you need to ask them is, what do you see on the page? What happens for you when you start reading?
Amazing.
See what they say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Welcome. Thank you.
Pleasure.